Welcome back. I'm Elon Musk. I've been analyzing the data from Minnesota, and the signal-to-noise ratio in the media is extremely low right now. They see chaos. I see a system update. Trump isn't just reacting, he's re-engineering the entire stack from the ground up. Let's dive in. Are you reading the headlines this morning? I honestly have to laugh. The legacy media, those absolute vultures, are trying to sell you a narrative that is so insulting to your intelligence, it's barely even funny. DHS is deploying hundreds more officers to Minnesota. They are flooding Minneapolis with federal assets. And, what are they telling you? The reason is. They say it's to maintain safety and protect ICE agents, after an officer was forced to discharge his weapon against a woman who tried to run him over on January 7th. Excuse me, but don't be naive. Wake up. If you think Donald Trump, a man who is currently playing 4D chess with the entire global order, is sending a massive federal force, we are talking about a military-scale deployment to Minneapolis just to direct traffic or protect a few buildings from stone throwers. You do not understand this. War. This isn't crowd control. This is a strategic siege. Look at the real numbers they are trying to bury in the fine print. Operation Metro Surge. More than 2,000 agents. 2,000. You don't need 2,000 federal agents, plus hundreds of additional DHS reinforcements, just to handle a self-defense shooting case or a few scattered protests. You need 2,000 boots on the ground when you are preparing for a massive sweep, a systemic purge. The Democrats in the deep state thought they had set a trap for Trump. They thought the shooting on January 7th was the spark. They wanted riots, they wanted Minnesota to burn like it did in 2020 so they could brand Trump a dictator. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. Trump didn't react the way they planned. He didn't play defense. He used their own trap as leverage. That incident was just the legal ticket. Trump needed to militarize Minnesota immediately. He has turned Minneapolis into a security green zone that nobody can touch. Why Minnesota? Why now? Connect the dots. On practically the same timeline, look what is happening with Somalia's status. Look at the terror designations for the Muslim Brotherhood and look at the chaos in Iran. None of this is a coincidence. Trump is tightening the noose, and Minnesota isn't just a protest site. It is the location where Trump is severing the financial aorta of a global terror network. They are in absolute panic mode, and I am about to show you exactly why. They want you to look at the left hand, while the right hand delivers the knockout punch. That is the oldest trick in the book, and the media is performing it perfectly. They have you focused entirely on the human interest story. They are blasting the name Renee Good across every screen. They want you debating whether the ICE officer was justified in shooting a woman who tried to run him over. They are trying to bait you into an emotional argument about police tactics and rising tensions. They are practically begging for a George Floyd II situation to distract the public. But stop looking at the shiny object. Look at the logistics. While the cameras are pointed at the protest lines, the Department of Homeland Security isn't just sending riot police. They are executing Operation Metro Surge. Listen to that name. That is not a peacekeeping mission. That is an invasion force. We are talking about over 2,000 federal agents descending on the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. You have to ask yourself, since when does the federal government deploy a force that size for fraud investigations or local gang violence? They don't. Unless that fraud is funding something much, much darker. The media tells you this is about public safety because of one shooting on January 7th. That is the cover story. The real operation is happening in the shadows. Trump used the immediate threat of violence against ICE agents to bypass local bureaucracy and drop a federal net over the entire city. He didn't ask for permission. He seized control. And notice the timing. At the exact moment these boots hit the ground in Minnesota, the administration announces the termination of temporary protected status for Somalia. You think those two things are unrelated. You think it's a coincidence that the largest Somali diaspora in the country is in Minnesota and suddenly thousands of feds are knocking on doors while their legal status evaporates. No, this is a coordinated pincer movement. The safety narrative is the Trojan horse. Trump is inside the gates and he is hunting for something specific. Here is where the trap actually snaps shut, and the genius of this plan becomes terrifyingly clear. While the media is busy interviewing heartbroken families and crying about how 2,500 Somali nationals are losing their temporary protected status, on March 17th, they are hoping you don't ask the obvious question, why? Terminate it, now. Why Minnesota, and why, in God's name, does this? Perfectly align with the designation of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization on the exact same news cycle. They want you to think this is just immigration policy. It's not. It's financial warfare. I dug into the details of the DOJ report tied to this Minnesota surge, and I found a set of numbers that the mainstream outlets are glazing over. They mention fraud investigations into social service programs. They tell you about 98 defendants, 85 of whom were of Somali descent. They want you to think this is just some local scammers stealing daycare money. But look at the scale. Look at the tactical data they slipped into the report. The Department of Justice hasn't just arrested a few people. They have issued 1750 subpoenas. They have executed over 130 search warrants. Stop and think about that. You don't issue nearly 2,000 subpoenas for a welfare scam. You don't deploy 2,000 federal agents to enforce fraud laws. That is an intelligence gathering operation. That is a network mapping exercise. Trump's team isn't just looking for stolen tax dollars. They are tracing where those dollars went after they were stolen. And here is the kicker, the piece of the puzzle that proves they are losing control. On Tuesday, January 13th, practically the same moment the Minnesota crackdown hits high gear, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announces that the U.S. is designating the Lebanese, Egyptian, and Jordanian branches of the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorist organizations. Do you see it yet? The fraud in Minnesota wasn't just greed. It was a pipeline. A terror pipeline. My theory, Trump's intelligence agencies tracked the flow of illicit funds from these massive fraud schemes in Minneapolis directly into the coffers of these radical groups abroad. That is why the response is military grade. That is why TPS had to end, not to deport people immediately, but to strip the legal cover and freeze the assets associated with those identities. Temporary means temporary, they said. That's the code. It means, we know who you are, we know who you fund, and we are cutting the wire. The Democrats are screaming about humanitarian crises because they are terrified of what those 1750 subpoenas are going to reveal. They are terrified that the trail leads right back to their own lax oversight that allowed millions of dollars to funnel out of the Midwest and into the hands of people who want to destroy the West. I'm going to reveal the final connection in a second, the one that explains why the president of Iran is suddenly screaming about foreign mercenaries and why Trump is telling the Iranian people to take over. You need to see this to understand the sheer scale of the checkmate. Now let's zoom out. Let's look at the global map, because this is where the art of war truly comes into play. If you were only watching the local news in Minneapolis, you missed the explosion. But if you were watching Tehran, you saw the shockwave hit. Look at the timeline. It is undeniable. The Department of Homeland Security floods Minnesota, the financial hub of this illicit network. The State Department designates the Muslim Brotherhood branches as terrorists, freezing their assets globally. And what happens immediately in Iran? The regime begins to crumble. The media tells you the protests in Iran are about the economy, about inflation, about the tragic death of Mahsa Amini years ago. Yes, the spirit of the people is real, but the timing of this collapse, that is Donald Trump. For weeks we have seen deadly unrest. The human rights activists' news agency confirms over 1850 protesters killed. The regime is desperate. They are slaughtering their own people, children included, to stay in power. Why? Because they are terrified. But why are they terrified now? Because the checks stopped clearing. When Trump cut the terror pipeline from the U.S., he didn't just stop welfare fraud. He cut off the liquidity that these regimes used to pay their enforcers. And notice Trump's reaction. He didn't call for de-escalation. He didn't ask for a ceasefire. He went on Truth Social and gave the order, take over your institutions. That is not the rhetoric of a president seeking a diplomatic deal. That is a commander-in-chief giving the go signal for a regime change. He canceled all meetings with Iranian officials. He shut the door. He told them, point blank, help is on its way. And what does that help look like? It looks like total suffocating isolation. While the talking heads were hyperventilating about his rhetoric, Vice President J.D. Vance was leading a National Security Council meeting that effectively drew up the death warrant for the Islamic Republic. We aren't talking about sanctions anymore. We are past that. We are talking about kinetic military options. My sources inside the Beltway are confirming that the Pentagon presented plans for precision strikes on IRGC command centers. No boots on the ground. Trump is too smart for another forever war, but targeted decapitation of their drone manufacturing and command nodes. They debated the red line. They asked if 2,000 dead protesters was enough to pull the trigger. But Trump has a weapon scarier than a Tomahawk missile. He has the Starlink integration plan. He is working with Elon Musk right now to bypass the regime's internet blackout. The mullahs cut the web because they want to hide the massacre. Trump is about to turn the lights back on. Imagine the panic in Tehran when they realize they can't silence the people anymore, when the world sees every atrocity in real time. And then the final economic nail, a 25% tariff on any country trading with Iran. Boom. Do you understand the gravity of that? He isn't just sanctioning Iran. He is threatening the entire global economy. If you do business with these murderers, you do not do business with America. He is forcing China, Europe, and everyone else to choose. And they will choose America. They always do. The Iranian foreign minister is screaming that they are prepared for war. The supreme leader is lashing out. Good. Let them scream. That is the sound of a regime that knows it is checkmated. They blamed foreign mercenaries. They blamed Israel. They blamed the U.S. They are flailing because their ghost fleets of oil tankers are being hunted, their cash from the U.S. is frozen, and their own people are marching on the city centers. And here is the ultimate proof that Trump is already looking past the current regime. He isn't negotiating with the Ayatollahs. His Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff was spotted meeting with Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the Shah. They are planning the transition. Pahlavi is out there telling Iranians to seize and hold city centers. He is positioning himself as the transitional leader. Trump's team is meeting with the next government of Iran while the current one is still gasping for air. This is the turnaround. The media wants you to think the world is on fire. They want you to think Trump is causing chaos. No. The chaos was always there, bubbling under the surface, funded by the very corruption Trump is now tearing out by the roots in Minnesota. What you are seeing now is not chaos. It is the controlled demolition of an evil empire. They thought they could use Minnesota as a piggy bank. They thought they could use the U.S. immigration system as a shield. They thought they could hold the world hostage with oil and terror. Trump just flipped the table. The boots on the ground in Minneapolis. The designation of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Starlink terminals, the tariffs, the meeting with the Shah's son. It is one single unified operation. Minnesota was the start. A free Iran is the finish line. And the deep state is terrified because if the files in Tehran are open just like the files in Minneapolis, the whole world is going to see who was really pulling the strings all these years. Once this trap snaps, shut, the whole system crumbles. And I mean the whole system. We are not just talking about a few corrupt politicians in Minnesota going to jail or a regime change in Iran. We are talking about the complete disintegration of the globalist method of control. Think about the precedent this sets. For decades, the deep state has operated on a very simple model. Import massive numbers of unvetted individuals, place them in strategic swing states, give them temporary protected status that somehow becomes permanent, hook them on federal benefits to buy their loyalty, and then look the other way when that money gets funneled back to warlords and terror cells who do the dirty work overseas. It was the perfect money laundering machine, and they protected it with the ultimate shield, racism. If you dared to ask where the money was going, you were a racist. If you asked why refugees were driving luxury cars in Minneapolis while our veterans slept on the street, you were a bigot. That word was their armor. It shut down every investigation before it could start. But Donald Trump just walked up to that armor and shattered it with a sledgehammer. By launching Operation Metro Surge, he proved that the racism shield no longer works. He showed that the American people, and even the legal immigrants who came here the right way, are sick of the scam. He exposed that this isn't about race, it's about treason. It's about theft. Now extrapolate this forward. When the dust settles in Minneapolis, those 1750 subpoenas are going to sing. Those 98 defendants, they are going to cut deals. They are going to give up names. And I guarantee you, those names don't stop at the city council level. They are going to reach into the NGOs, the nonprofits, the legal aid societies, and yes, the federal agencies that facilitated this fraud for years. We are about to see the great declassification of the immigration industrial complex. Imagine the panic in London. Imagine the panic in Paris and Berlin. They are watching Minnesota, and they are terrified. Because they have the exact same Somali gang problems, the exact same no-go zones, the exact same welfare fraud pipelines funding extremism. If the United States, the superpower, can go in military style and clean it up, the people of Europe are going to demand the same. Trump isn't just saving America. He is exporting the blueprint for survival to the entire Western world. And look at the Middle East. With the Iranian regime on the ropes, the dominoes fall fast. No Iran means no funding for Hezbollah, no funding for Hamas, No funding for the Houthis disrupting our shipping lanes. The axis of resistance becomes the axis of unemployed mercenaries. Without the chaos in the Middle East, oil prices stabilize. Energy dominance returns to America. The Green New Deal scammers lose their leverage because we don't need to beg dictators for oil anymore. And let's go deeper. What happens to the Democratic Party when their harvesting machine is dismantled? Minnesota was a stronghold. It was a lock. But if you remove the fraudulent voters, if you deport the illegal operatives, if you jail the ringleaders of the ballot harvesting schemes, disguised as community outreach, Minnesota turns red. And if Minnesota turns red, the blue wall is gone forever. This is why they are screaming. This is why they are calling him a fascist. They know that Operation Metro Surge is the pilot program. Next, it's Chicago. Then it's New York. Then it's California. Trump is effectively auditing the United States of America. He is going state by state, city by city, and asking, where did the money go, and who are you really working for? The awakening is here. People are realizing that the chaos they see on TV, the riots, the wars, the inflation, it was all manufactured. It was all paid for, with your tax dollars routed, through places like Minneapolis, sent to places like Tehran to keep the world on fire so the elites could rule over the ashes. But the fire is going out. The internet is coming back on in Iran. The lights are being turned on in the dark corners of the DHS bureaucracy. The ghost fleets are sinking. We are moving toward a future where the rule of law actually means something. A future where temporary actually means temporary. A future where, if you attack a federal agent, you don't get a press conference defending you, you get the full weight of the United States government crashing down on your network. This is the cleansing. It's painful for them, but it's glorious for us. The corrupt institutions are not just being defeated, they are being delegitimized. Every subpoena is a crack in the foundation. Every seized hard drive is a ticking time bomb for the establishment. And the best part, we are just watching the opening moves. Trump hasn't even played his queen yet. If you think the Muslim Brotherhood designation caused panic, wait until you see what he does with the domestic NGOs that were partnering with them. The storm isn't coming, folks. The storm is here, and it is cleaning house. Now look at the horizon. This is where the story gets really big. We are witnessing the dismantling of the globalist syndicate live and in color. For decades, the model was simple: keep the Middle East burning, keep the borders open, and keep the energy prices high. That trifecta allowed a small group of elites to control nations. But Trump, he is the wrench in the gears. When he announced that 25% tariff on anyone trading with Iran, he wasn't just talking about economics. He was drawing a line in the sand for the entire world. He looked at China, he looked at the European Union, and he said, you are either with the American patriot or you are with a terrorist regime. Choose. And guess what? They are going to choose America. Because without the American consumer, their economies die. Trump knows this. He is weaponizing the US dollar, not to build nations abroad, but to force the world to stop funding our enemies. Look at the Starlink integration plan. This is the ultimate symbol of the new era. In the old days, the CIA would smuggle cash to pick a winner. Today, Trump and Musk are smuggling truth. By blasting internet access into a blackout zone, they are giving the power back to the people, bypassing the censors, bypassing the state media. It is the democratization of information, and it is the dictator's worst nightmare. This is the America First foreign policy in action. It's not isolationism, it's strategic dominance. He is telling the world, we will no longer subsidize your chaos. Europe is watching Minnesota and sweating bullets. They know that if the U.S. successfully purges the terror pipeline and deports the fraud rings, the pressure on their own failing systems will be unbearable. Their citizens will look at America safe, secure, prosperous, and they will demand the same cleanup. Trump is starting a global chain reaction. He is proving that Western civilization doesn't have to commit suicide. The Minnesota raid, the TPS termination, the Muslim Brotherhood designation, the Iran squeeze, it is all one signal. The free ride is over. The era of the globalist managed decline is over. We are entering the age of sovereignty. And it all started because one man refused to blink when they tried to burn down Minneapolis. So, let's wrap this up and look at the board one last time. If you take nothing else away from this, understand this simple truth: the game has changed. For years we were told that we were helpless. We were told that the demographic shift was inevitable, that the forever wars were unavoidable, and that the corruption in our cities was just the cost of doing business. They demoralized us. They told us that if we tried to enforce our laws, the cities would burn. They held a gun to the head of the American public and said, "Don't you dare touch our funding streams or we will unleash chaos." Donald Trump just looked down the barrel of that gun and pulled the trigger on them. Everything you are seeing right now, the hundreds of DHS officers swarming Minnesota, the termination of TPS for Somalia, the terror designation of the Muslim Brotherhood, the tariffs on Iran, the Starlink terminals dropping from the sky, it is all part of the same masterstroke. He didn't just react to a crisis. He orchestrated a solution that solved three problems at once. 1. He is securing the homeland. By launching Operation Metro Surge, he is physically removing the bad actors from our streets. He is turning over the rocks in Minneapolis and finding the snakes underneath. Those 1750 subpoenas. They are the roadmap to the entire deep state network. 2. He is bankrupting the terror state. By cutting the Minnesota pipeline and freezing the assets of the Brotherhood, he starved the beast. You don't defeat an enemy by fighting his soldiers. You defeat him by bankrupting his payroll. The regime in Iran is collapsing not because of U.S. missiles, but because the U.S. dollar is no longer flowing into their accounts via the welfare fraud scams in the Midwest. 3. He is empowering the people. Whether it is the citizens of Minneapolis reclaiming their neighborhoods or the patriots of Iran taking back their country, Trump is giving the power back to the individuals. He is proving that when you remove the artificial support for tyranny, whether it is a corrupt NGO or a theocratic dictatorship, freedom breaks out naturally. The media will keep screaming. They will tell you this is cruel. They will tell you it is destabilizing. They will tell you that Trump is a threat to democracy. But you know the truth now. You know that when they say destabilizing, they mean we are destabilizing their control. When they say threat to democracy, they mean a threat to their bureaucracy. The headline said DHS deploys hundreds more officers to Min. The reality is Donald Trump begins the liberation of the Western world. They tried to bait him with a shooting. He answered with an invasion. They tried to hide behind temporary status. He answered with Time's Up. They tried to black out the internet. He answered with Starlink. This is what winning looks like. It's not polite, it's not quiet, it's loud, it's aggressive, and it's unapologetic. So the next time you see a breaking news alert trying to make you panic, trying to make you feel like the world is falling apart, stop, take a breath, and remember the Minnesota blueprint. Ask yourself, what funding stream did Trump just cut? Who is panicking, and where is the money trail leading? Because while they are playing checkers with the news cycle, Trump is playing 4D chess with history. The trap has been sprung, the evidence has been secured, and the checkmate is inevitable. Stay sharp, stay tuned, and watch the show, because the best part is just getting started.